And good afternoon, everybody. And we're just slightly late. My name is Justin Blake. We've got my colleague with us, Doug Richie, in California this afternoon. How's things, Doug?
Things are great in California, except it's raining today.
Okay. Well, we're like -1 in temperature here. So
Okay.
It's getting pretty. We're in the middle of winter. We had some snow yesterday, which was good. Makes things look a little bit more picturesque.
Good for you.
Certainly highlighted the thing. So, but yeah, everybody's wanting some warm weather now, especially with the way things are. Of course, interesting times in the States. Tom Brady to another Super Bowl final.
Wow, so you're a fan, I guess.
I'm a Bears fan, unfortunately.
Oh, are you? Okay, yeah, those were two very good games yesterday.
Yes.
And there's hope for us old guys.
You think?
Yeah.
Old guys. Well, he's hardly old, is he? What age is he?
Well, he's getting better with age.
Yeah. Better with age. Let me just sort that out. He's getting better with age. Yes, most certainly. So yeah, but no, certainly interesting times. I mean, you don't practice with patients anymore, Doug?
No, I retired from clinical practice 2 years ago, almost to the day.
Yes. Okay.
Allows me to devote more time to teaching and running my Richie Brace company and other endeavors. So it was a good thing.
Yes, and of course, more time to spend on the new book that's just come out.
Yes.
So we're going to talk a lot about that today, because I have made my way through about the first 4 or 5 chapters. But especially the midfoot. I think, well, of course, the foot is. I think the foot is still the misunderstood foot, to quote a colleague.
Yes, I would say that's still true today.
And there was a lot of information in there, which is going to, I think, change the way that, well, certainly things. Well, I hope the way things are going to be taught. There's a lot more sort of scientific research to back up, especially in the midfoot, because a lot of the patient problems that I saw in the last number of years, midfoot was playing a huge part of it. And one of the interesting things was that there's more dorsiflexion in the midfoot than there is actually in the ankle joint.
Yeah, absolutely. A number of
why do we measure ankle equinus and get so caught up about it?
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's actually one of the points I made in the book.
Yeah, because I mean, ankle equinus, I think, is drummed into us that it's it's the most destructive, problem that affects foot function.
Oh yeah, I see it attributed today as the primary evil of the human foot is equinus.
Yes.
The most destructive mechanism affecting or causing foot dysfunction. Absolutely. Yeah. And yet we don't really have a way to measure true ankle equinus. So the diagnosis is elusive at best.
Elusive, to say the least. Yeah. And it goes into quite a lot of sort of debunking the sort of the unlocking and locking sort of theories in there. Which is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, if I go back, to my own development and my own education, it was early on that I would hear my professors, including John Weed and Mert Root, use the word foot pronation and subtalar pronation interchangeably. Mm-hmm. And they would say, well, I observed this patient, their foot, da-da-da-da, and I would stop and say, when you say the foot, what joint are you talking about that's actually moving here? And they would often say, well, of course, the subtalar joint. And so, fundamental to a lot of Root's teachings and his proteges was interchangeably using the subtalar joint with the foot and attributing all motion of the foot to the subtalar joint. Mm-hmm. And so one of the early points of my book was showing all these elegant kinematic studies that show that the subtalar joint contributes less motion than at least 4 other joints in the foot. Even in the frontal plane, inversion, eversion, the subtalar joint ranks 4th in overall contribution. The talonavicular joint contributes more. The ankle joint contributes more. And so does the cuboid 5th metatarsal joint, believe it or not, contributes more frontal plane inversion, eversion than the subtalar joint. And yet today there are many people who think the subtalar joint is the keystone joint of the foot. It's the fundamental determiner of all foot function and foot pathology. And we're finding that, no, as you're alluding to, the midfoot joints are far more important.
There's quite a lot going on there.
Yeah, there is. And the trouble is the subtalar joint was a joint, at least in terms of rear foot angle, we could look at pretty easily in the clinic. But looking at these subtle movements in the midfoot is difficult in the, in the clinical setting. And so I think for years people just kind of overlooked it because they couldn't see it.
Yeah. And well, of course, well, no, we'll get onto orthotics and treatments later on. We'll stick with pathology. Because, and I mean, I hadn't been aware of the sort of this, well, certainly the rotations of the foot, and certainly again with Boson-Moeller and all the lateral column, because again the lateral column again is sort of tends to be ignored,
right,
on the side of the foot. It's all about hypermobility and first metatarsal and first MPJ, hallux valgus, and hallux limitus rigidus. But of course, the lateral side of the foot has a lot of control over, in terms of the function.
Yeah, I go into that in the book. We segmented the foot. Now in the 70s, Root and Weed particularly segmented the foot into the forefoot and the rear foot. And I'll be honest with you, I rarely heard terms like lateral column, medial column in my education. The orthopedic surgeons started using those terms, and pretty much we accepted them in the surgical community. We talked about lateral column lengthening procedure, so the so-called Evans osteotomy, and medial column arthrodesis, and these columns I didn't really even understand. I had to go back and kind of read about it, and then later I discovered this fellow named McConnell who segmented the foot vertically, and we really kind of discovered later that guys like Vern Inman and others segmented the foot vertically. In other words, they looked at the tibia, the fibula, and the talus as one unit, and then all of the bones below it in the vertical level as the other segment. And to be honest with you, that's the more accurate way to do it.
Yeah, they didn't include the talus within the foot.
Correct.
It was part of the lower leg and ankle.
Yeah.
But the talus, of course, is you sort of with the control and the alignment and the position of the talus. I mean, do you think that's a lot of underlying cause into the with an anterior sort of shift of the talus in the ankle joint and a whole knock-on sort of sequelae through the foot? If you say it have a common ankle sprain.
No, I think the critical movement is all those bones under the talus. I don't think that's a big debate today, whether this tibio-talar unit directs motion of the foot bones or whether the foot bones direct motion retrograde into the tibia and talus, or even in bigger terms, whether the proximal part of our lower extremity, the hip, drives the foot or the foot drives the hip. And the research today is still somewhat equivocal on that. There's evidence that both drive shaft mechanisms are important, but I think the talus is really a passive bone, and it's directed more. The talus itself is directed by the tibia. There's no question. The tibia is the longer lever arm. The talus is firmly housed in the ankle mortise. It does have freedom of movement, but it's this massive tibia with a weight-bearing body above that drives the talus. But it's the response of the bones under the talus that ultimately determines stability and in my mind, the development of pathology. It's all those little bones that are